Fantastic. Welcome. Welcome to this talk on human coordination and privacy in Web3. I'm Adrian. I'm the founder of, one of the founders of Anoma, which sort of at a very high level is a system for economic self-sovereign coordination and privacy-preserving protocols. I'll quickly start with talking about what are the current forms of human coordination. So the most dominant form at the moment really is governments which are directed by mostly democratic elections that sort of steer a country or a community forward, right? This is pretty much what we have in most of the Western world, and pretty much actually mostly around the world. This is sort of the predominant model at this moment. One thing to consider though, it's a very lossy process, right? When you go from, because you go from basically an election, which is a binary choice on whether you want to have person A or person B, and you try to condense down like what are your views for the world. You may have crazy views, right? You may be a gun-loving climate change activist that loves nuclear power. This probably exists, but you are in this process via an election where you go, well, I have a very complex view of the world and what I want to get out of the world, and it's being reduced to this binary choice where you have to figure out what is the least worst candidate that probably supports a majority of the points that I want to get across. And politicians are actually in even a worse situation because they have to figure out the opposite side of that optimization function, which is I need to get re-elected in 4 years from now. What is the majority subset of the population and what points do they have in common across the entire spectrum? So they have to combine a bunch of viewpoints in order to get re-elected. This leads to like a focus on a lot of, like not even the fringe opinions, but a lot of things that aren't majority viewpoints easily get lost in this process. I want to start with 2 videos because turns out you can just walk into the state capitol. It's like down the road. And so like on Monday evening I was bored and just walked in, and they're actually very nice and it's a great co-working space. They have power plugs in the library and like a cafeteria where I'm certain no one's trying to steal from me. So go check this out. But then on yesterday I went back and you can actually watch the legislative sessions because they have like a nice balcony, and so I recorded like 2 short videos, if they work, on the Senate. Oh, you can see it, nice, I just can't see it. Right, there we go, and I now have to like go over here to see. So what I want you to sort of, the context is pretty boring. They're talking about some bill to teach police officers how to not entrap minors when they arrest them. Seems reasonable, and I don't think this should be like hotly debated, but the problem is, right, so these are 60 seats, roughly, of people that get paid full-time for their job, right? You look at this and there are like maybe 15 people there. So 15 people, like the rest didn't show up for work really. But the better part in this entire thing is just watch what the people do. So like at the front there's just a group of people chatting next to the speaker who, by the way, if you could hear the audio, is just like droning on and keeps losing his point on why this bill is important. A bunch of people are on their iPads. A bunch of other people in the background are still just walking around and chatting with each other. And I have to tell you, this is the first time I ever walked into a session like this, anywhere in the world. And it is pretty terrifying because to a large extent, our existing systems are based around the competence that we saw in these videos. So if this is even an average, we're probably doing very poorly on a global scale. By the way, also, like, so I spoke to a bunch of people that said they didn't want to go alone. If you're interested, I'm happy to go back there tomorrow. They're very friendly people. So you don't even have to wear a mask. I asked a guy about it and he was like, kind of, I don't know. It was a very confusing experience. Also, if you're coming to Dev Connect in Amsterdam, I'm planning to do the same thing in Amsterdam and see what local democracy is, because I think we should be figuring out the people we're kind of competing against. Like, can we build better systems than these? And to me, honestly, the answer seems pretty obvious. Right, but let's go to like, what are requirements for human coordination? 2 of the big ones are common sense making and a shared reality. we are starting to have really big problems if we can't agree what the current state of the world is, right? If we can't agree on what the basic facts are, and it doesn't actually, if we can't agree whether a thing is happening, we can't potentially consider this a problem or come up with solutions to address this problem, right? So, and the bigger problem is that, I mean, I'm probably not alone here in this room. In the last couple of years, democracy seems to have rapidly eroded, much quicker than I expected, which is a very terrifying realization. But it really comes down to the fact that we don't seem to see the same view of the world anymore. And so we don't have a shared reality, and hence we can't make choices on what we should be doing. The second big process is a process to coordinate effectively in order to achieve Pareto optimal efficiencies here. And really this comes down to what you just saw is the process we currently have once we have an understanding of what the shared reality is. And what I'm proposing is that with Web3, we can actually be building much more efficient systems in order to facilitate this, what do we want to get out of life as humanity. It is, I'm also, if there's interest, let me know. You can reach me on Telegram. We may call this a capital DAO. It'd be cool. So, what do we need for an ideal system to facilitate human coordination? This is not an exclusive list, but I would say that two of the very important points are we need direct coordination between thousands of people, as in thousands of people need to be able to express their preferences, what they want to get out of the world, in a better system that is a binary choice every 4 years on a ballot, right? So we need to have a system that where I can say, well, I care about climate change and animals should be treated right, and I think we should stop invading other countries, right? Like this is sort of, but I can define this very broadly, and we need to have the ability to have thousands of people do this so that we can see what people want to get out of society at large. And once we have this, we need a process or something that enables binding commitments that are enforceable. And here blockchains are very obvious solutions because they allow us to send signed messages that are potentially executable on chain and hence can be seen as binding commitments, right? Because otherwise you always have this problem where thousands of people say they want X, but they have nothing at stake, so they say they want X, Y, and Z, and they want everything at the same time. But real life has trade-offs, and we need systems that recognize this. And maybe also the other very important point, I think, we need spectrums, because sometimes I have preferences for very short ephemeral interactions, right, where maybe today I want to buy carbon neutral coffee in Starbucks, but it's a one-time thing. But there are other cases where, for example, I may want to signal and say to the world that I want to buy clean energy all the time. So I need a way to make permanent commitments to what I want to do in life. I have to say, DAOs are often hailed as this sort of savior for all. I don't think DAOs here are the solution. DAOs are like very, very cool, efficient, programmable joint stock companies. They don't fundamentally solve the problem of how do we get 1,000 people into a room to coordinate across, like to come up with a shared vision for where we want to go. By the way, I'm going to come to privacy in a sec. Actually, let me quickly fix this here. So, I have somewhat of a this is a proposal for what this kind of system could, what kind of system could implement what I just spoke about. And it's intent, gossip, and matchmaking. Effectively, intents are small pieces of programmatic code that allow individuals to express complex requirements that are one-off. As in, for example, I may want to buy a CryptoPunk that is carbon neutral. So I can write, I am willing to buy a CryptoPunk for X price as long as it's carbon neutral. And the nice thing is these things can be ephemeral. So we can have hundreds of millions of them floating around, so if you can imagine this is a large soup of intents. And they don't actually have to hit any chain. They don't have to be settled, they aren't consensus relevant. Not everyone needs to have the same global view of all these intents. But once you have this, you also need economic incentives for people to look at different kinds of intents and say, well, which ones here are combinable? Which which two intents can I take and put into a transaction so that the people get what they want out of them, right? Because so the simplest form of an intent is a trade actually. It's like I want to sell some Bitcoin for some ETH, and then someone else across the world could actually sell some ETH for some Bitcoin, and there needs to be an economic incentive that someone looks at the soup and figures out that these two things are matchable and settleable on chain. The nice thing here is that intents are very flexible, as in they can be thousands of intents to a transaction. So you can have this traditional example of a three-party trade. I have BTC, want ETH, you have ETH, want dots, and some third person has dots and wants BTC. No one has a direct match, so like no one can trade directly with each other, but if you take all three of them together, they're settleable on chain. And this scales to thousands. So you can imagine a scenario where 1,000 people don't have any overlapping wants, but if you take all thousands together, they're settleable on chain. The nice thing is this also enables full counterparty discovery, because one of the big things we have right now is that pretty much every system, like every time you want to interact or trade on a blockchain, you're trading against a central counterparty. Whether that central counterparty is Coinbase or Uniswap, it doesn't actually matter, but you have to know the counterparty that you want to be interacting with. Whereas in this proposed system, you can go, I just want to buy some Bitcoin, and I'm willing to sell some ETH for it, and anyone that can satisfy this intent can settle this on chain. Yeah, and they're just really fully programmable pieces of code. The last thing here is also validity predicates. They are there to enforce long-term preferences around, for example, buying carbon neutral energy. And by the way, I'm maybe jumping a little bit between abstractions here, but sort of a trade is a very simple form of coordination, but this kind of system generalizes to incorporating the cost of carbon into 1,000 people wanting to purchase Nike sneakers. It's all just a matter of writing this. It is not a matter of whether the system supports it. Yeah, so some examples of what you can build. Buying CO2 neutral Starbucks coffee once, subscribing permanently to CO2 neutral energy, or actually the city of people, like 1,000 people in Denver can commit to funding a local duck pond because they'd like it. I don't know. Right, coming to privacy. So why does privacy matter? Privacy is what leverages the playing field in asymmetric information games. And by the way, there is a link between privacy and human coordination, because you need privacy in order for human coordination to actually work in practice. So what do I mean by this first bullet point? Well, think about your interaction with Facebook. Facebook itself is very, very private. You are very, very public. It's a massive information asymmetry where you don't actually have a lot of power. If the roles were inversed and you actually owned all your data, and Facebook privately and Facebook was transparent, this leverages the playing field. The same applies to nation states. Generally speaking, societies where individuals have a lot of protection are, I think, what I would call more just and more enjoyable to live in than where the government can surveil everyone, but no one can surveil the government. And actually, the second point is not having privacy. Like, everyone keeps saying that, well, if I have nothing to hide, I don't need privacy. The problem is that not having privacy changes your behavior. And I'll use the example here of a US-Mexican border art gallery. So the art gallery kind of displays the atrocities that happen across the border, or that happen while crossing the border. If you go to this art gallery in the physical world, you're probably fine, right? Like, you like to tell people that you were there, you like to talk about what you're seeing there. You can build in an informed opinion without fear of prosecution. This model would change quite a bit, I think, if at every art gallery there's a government official standing there recording your name, what time you came there, who you came with, who you spoke to, what you spoke about, what picture, and for how many seconds you viewed it, how your pupils dilated while viewing it. But this is the current model of the internet. This is sort of, you go to a virtual art gallery and all this data is being recorded about you, and this changes people's behavior. I have some references at the back that link to some studies that show how if people know they're being watched, they change in order to fit in or because they're afraid of being prosecuted. And this even, so here you can sort of say that more privacy leads to more truth. And the third thing is privacy fights against surveillance capitalism. One of the problems with Facebook knowing a bunch of data about you is that they can do micro-targeting. As in, they can create your own individual hellhole where you are very incentivized to keep scrolling. This is pretty much the optimization function Facebook is running, and TikTok is running too, which is how do I keep the user as engaged as possible? It's like, this is they could show you pure violence if this is the thing that keeps you scrolling every 2 seconds. This is the model, right? And so by not having any privacy in our digital lives, everyone just opens themselves up to be put into these filter bubbles because large-scale organizations have an incentive to show you the thing that enrages you the most. Due to all these above points, privacy is what fundamentally makes human coordination possible, because it is what allows people to individually express what they really want to get out of life without being afraid that other people may judge them for it, right? Like, this is the important thing. People should not be afraid to express their opinion because they think some other people on Twitter will yell at them for it. This is where we're currently heading, though, which is terrifying. So, what is the current state of privacy in Web3? I thought it was bad before I came here, but then I came here and I realized it was way worse. So 99% of all systems are completely transparent, and probably 99% of all users aren't remotely aware of this. On Sunday, I had a great conversation at the Super Bowl with 2 guys who were completely convinced that Ethereum was fully private. They entered the space 3 months ago. It's not their fault. Like, the intuition that public blockchains give you are just wrong, right? Like, they give you the intuition that there's this sort of this hex address that maps in no way to my real-world identity, but the reality is that the amount of metadata you're leaking on a public transparent chain is enough to de-anonymize you, and certainly to figure out if you ever, like, I don't know if any of you did this, but if you ever link your NFT to your Twitter profile, everyone that spends a little bit of time will figure out exactly your financial history on Ethereum. Like, it's trivial. And this is like not even a sophisticated attacker. Chainalysis does this way better at this point. So yeah, if you ever sort of give in, actually, we all doxed ourselves when we try to get food. Because we all got the Arbitrum tokens and Ethereum addresses don't change between networks. So yeah, unless you are very careful, like you should have public addresses for specifically for public interactions that don't ever interact with your private addresses. Yeah, and then the second point is, even though pseudonymous nature is being eroded, Coinbase released this very nice thing to be locally compliant in the US, which just says, we will collect all your data and we put it onto a private bulletin board that we share with all the other exchanges in the States and globally. Great. I have to say, there has been some amazing work done. So Zcash clearly has been leading the way there. I think Zcash in 2017 started making a lot of the things we do nowadays possible. Okay, quick interlude on interoperability. The world will be multi-chain because assets are very expensive to create, as in it's very hard to create a hard currency, but it's very cheap to get 20 software developers into a room to write new software to try those assets out. So generally speaking, the model will be that assets will flow to state machines and not state machines won't come to assets. As in, cool new applications aren't going to come to your favorite assets. Your favorite assets will probably go to the cool state machines. Okay, coming back to privacy. So one of the big things which we've actually been starting to work on is privacy solutions need to be asset agnostic. So we're building something called the MASP, the multi-asset shielded pool. You can think of this as it is a unified global privacy set for your NFT, your USDC, your USDT, your ETH, your Atom, your NEAR, it doesn't matter. Anything that's interoperable can flow into the privacy set, into the MASP, and gain full privacy guarantees that Zcash currently offers for ZEC. Okay, 2 more minutes. Okay, I need to hurry up a little bit. Oh yeah, we should start tackling this. The governments are going after the real-world use cases anyway already. Just look to Canada this week. People are starting to realize that it's way easier to freeze someone's bank account than actually have any sort of due process or allow dissenting opinions. But more generally speaking, going forward, we need to provide privacy not just for assets, but generally for human coordination. Because long-term, this is really the problem that we need to be solving. It's not how do we make our USDT or NFT private. It's how do we enable humans to coordinate across the globe in order to not blow up the planet due to global warming or due to nuclear war. All of these things are sort of global problems that governments are honestly failing to solve, which I now know why. Practically speaking, this requires that we can build tons of new circuits. So I think one of the most exciting areas anyone here could go into is zero knowledge proof development and circuit development. Yes, I will shut up in a sec. Okay, there we go. Yeah, conclusion, the world is falling apart around us. This is all very scary. This is like not that great. We should be doing something about this. I don't think I'm the only one that feels this way. Autocracy is a very easy answer, by the way. Global sense making gets very easy if there's just one guy at the top that has to coordinate everything. But I actually think Web3 can provide very good alternatives, and we should be thinking not about how to build the next Ponzi scheme, but rather how to build tools that actually impact humanity. Oh yeah, and if you would like to, more references, check it out. Also, message me if you found this interesting. Also, if you're interested in going to the Senate tomorrow, let me know. Thank you very much.
Awesome.